Okay, we're going to discuss part two of the amazing God forbid doctrine. The amazing God forbid doctrine. You've never heard this doctrine before in Christianity because they don't want you to know what this God forbid business is. Paul uses the phrase God forbid quite a lot. It's a King James word. The actual phrase translated properly is may it not be coming to that. There's no such word as God and forbid in this thing, but I like the God forbid translation of the King James because it has a little punch, a little gusto to it. God forbid. What's he talking about? Paul, every time he uses this phrase, God forbid, he's talking about grace in such dramatic fashion that it would make the audience stand up and say, "Wait a minute, what about this?" And Paul would have to say, "God forbid," which in essence would be, "Shut up! Someone slap that guy! Hey, don't run down the wrong directions. You're misconstruing my point." There's such powerful ideas in this big thing, this grace thing that Paul teaches, that it's so easy for the selfish, soulish, so-called saint to run off in a wild direction and misconstrue everything. So we're going to start looking at it here. This is chapter 2. We'll start at verse 11 because right here is the big hint of where he's going with this whole thing about grace. Verse 11, for there is no partiality with God. The reason Christendom hates the teaching of grace because they know in their heart that if God graciously saves some sucker that doesn't deserve to be saved, then he actually has to save all suckers who don't deserve to be saved. And they are filled with pride because they think they have saved themselves by doing, jumping through hoops and obeying the law and doing works. But no, this grace thing, the true definition of grace is the favor of God shown to those who don't deserve favor, and in fact, they deserve the opposite. All right, verse 11, there is no partiality with God. For whoever sinned without the law also shall perish, and whoever sinned in law, through law shall be judged. For not the listeners to the law are just with God, but the doers of the law. For whenever they of the nations that have no law by nature may be doing what the law demands, these, having no law, are a law unto themselves. Isn't this kind of dramatic language? You got to think about it. Paul is getting into some wonderful, deep stuff here. Verse 15. They're a law to themselves, who are displaying the actions of law written in their heart and their conscience, testifying together, and their reckoning between one another, accusing or defending them. And in the day when God will be judging the hidden things of humanity, according to my evangel, through Jesus Christ. Lo, you are being denominated a Jew, and are resting on law and boasting in God, and know the will, and are testing what things are of consequence, being instructed of the law. Besides, you have confidence in yourself to be a guide of the blind, a light to those in darkness, a discipliner of the imprudent, a teacher of minors. Are you a teacher of minors? Having the form of knowledge and the truth of the law, you then who are teaching another, you are not teaching yourself and are heralding not to be stealing, but you were stealing. You were saying not to be committing adultery. You were committing adultery. Bunch of hypocrites who are abominating idols. You are despoiling the sanctuary, who are boasting in law, and through the transgression of the law you are dishonoring God. Because of you the name of God is being blasphemed among the nations, as it's written. For circumcision indeed is benefiting if you should be putting the law into practice, yet if you should be a transgressor of the law, your circumcision has become useless uncircumcision. If the circumcision then should be maintaining the just requirements of the law, shall not his uncircumcision be reckoned for circumcision, and the circumcision who by nature, and the uncircumcised people who by nature are discharging the laws demanded? the law's demands, shall be judging you through the letter and circumcision are a transgressor of law. For that which is apparent, for not that which is apparent is the Jew, nor yet that which is apparent is in flesh is the circumcision. Okay, so let's get that straight. Just because it looks like a Jew is not really a Jew, because, verse 29, that which is hidden is the Jew. He's speaking in figurative language here. And the circumcision is of the heart, in spirit, not in letter, whose applause is not of men, but of God. Okay, now we're going to get to the real juicy part where we get to the God forbid business. Chapter 3, verse 1. What then is the prerogative of the Jew, or the benefit of circumcision? Much, in every manner, for first indeed, that they were entrusted with the oracles of God. And what if some disbelieve? Will not their unbelief nullify the faithfulness of God? God forbid. May it not be coming to that. God forbid. Will their unbelief nullify the faithfulness of God? In other words, hidden in this phrase here, we could make the argument that just because the vast majority don't believe, it's not going to nullify the faithfulness of God. God intends to pull off his grand purpose to reconcile the whole universe and head up to all in the Christ. And here we get a hint of it. What if some disbelieve? What about it? What if some disbelieve? Will not their unbelief nullify the faithfulness of God? Here's our first God forbid sentence. God forbid. Oh my gosh. You won't hear this phrase quoted from the popular preachers. What if some disbelieve? So what? Don't go down that road. God is faithful. Now, let God be true and every man a liar, even as it's written that so thou shouldst be justified in the saying that and shall be conquering when thou art being judged. Now, if our injustice is commending God's righteousness, what shall we declare? Not that God, who is bringing on indignation, is unjust. As a man, I'm saying it, God forbid. All right, so this is getting into such reckless doctrine that Paul has to bring it up before anybody else thinks about it. Now, if our injustice is commending God's righteousness, what shall we declare? Not that God, who is bringing on indignation, is unjust? Oh, as a man, I'm saying this. God forbid, may it not be coming to that. Don't go down that road. But he is clearly showing just how powerful God's love and redemptive power is, because he can go down the road before anybody else does. Now, if our injustice is commending God's righteousness, that's true. Our own injustice is commending God's righteousness. Our injustice is commending God's righteousness. What shall we declare? Not that God, who is bringing on indignation, is unjust. As a man, I'm saying it. May it not be coming to that. Else, how else shall God be judging the world? Of course, God is going to judge the world. And as we go along, you're going to see that this judgment that God brings is actually a good thing. It's not a bad thing. The Christians in the popular culture, they believe that sin is such a problem, that judgment is just to absolutely punish the sinner. There's an Old Testament verse that says, judge the widows and the fatherless, which shows that the word judgment doesn't necessarily mean just punish someone. It means do something right for them. And God is going to judge all, and which means he's going to make things right with all. He's going to judge all and make things right with all. And so we have our first little taste here It's a little complicated. Go back over it yourself. That Paul says, God forbid and God forbid. What is the prerogative of the Jew? What if some disbelieve? Will their unbelief nullify the faithfulness of God? Psh, no, don't go down that road. Now, what if our injustice is commending God's righteousness? Wow, it's just a big concept, but don't mistake it, the concept. Don't go down that road too far. You're missing the point. The point is that God is God. We are not God. We don't control our own destiny. We're in for a treat because God is the creator of all and the savior of all. Okay, this is the first two. Romans 3 verse 4 and Romans 3 verse 6. That's the first two places where the word forbid shows up in Romans. And we'll go over some more tomorrow. Thanks for spending some time with me. Grace to you.